population are far more Buddhist there, far more interested in Buddhism in Australia than say in this country. Then in Europe, most of Europe, and a lot of Europe. So maybe the interest in the West has coincided with, I'd say very much, strongly coincided with the exile of the Dalai Lama from Tibet. I don't know if you know the history of Tibet, but Buddhism went there about the 8th century. And because it's so isolated, way out on the other side of Mount Everest, and also politically, they wanted to be isolated, so not many people would go there. Apparently the Jesuits went there and they even translated all the Bible into Tibetan. They couldn't get it into Tibetan, so they launched Christians in Tibet. A few Muslims apparently. The Jesuits had no success at all in Tibet. They were having this Buddhism. Anyway, Buddhism was there in the 8th century, from the 8th century. And I'd say before 1959, when there was finally an uprising against the Chinese communists, because the Chinese, like a lot of other parts of China, basically co-opted Tibet and said it was part of their country, which is a big legal issue now, 60 years later. So, the beginning, the Chinese came in at about 1950. And up until that time, there was almost nowhere. A few Westerners would go to Tibet if you read the histories. But basically, they still remained completely isolated. And I would say, up to that time, 99% of Tibetans were Buddhist. And I would say, there were 6 million people, probably 1 million. 1 million of the 6 million were monastic, monks or nuns. Monasteries were completely pervasive throughout the country. And there was, so within Buddhism, in the world, there's two main strands, if you like. One is called Hinayana Buddhism, or known sometimes as Theravada Buddhism. So if we use this analogy of the 2 wings of the bird, all this inner work we're talking about here, learning to meditate, know your own mind, you live in vows of morality, you don't kill, you don't lie, you don't steal, this kind of whole approach to spiritual practice. That's the wisdom wing. The Buddha would say from doing that kind of work, you eventually achieve your own liberation. You quit suffering, you get rid of all the delusions, you go beyond ego, and you achieve your nirvana, as they call it. It's not equivalent to heaven, it's a state of being. And once you achieve that, you don't need to get reborn again in the cycle of rebirth. Buddha says you get reborn again and again in different types of realms of existence, animals, humans, etc. So once you quit that, you've seen reality, you've removed these neuroses from your mind, you quit ego, you've developed all your goodness, and then you're finished. Well, that's the Theravada Hinayana path. And that's the Buddhism that's taught in Thailand, Burma, a few countries like that. And then you've got the next kind of, you've got the compassion wing, which is often we read the term the Bodhisattva path. Well, the word Buddha is a Sanskrit word. It means Buddha. Sorry, it is a Sanskrit word. But the Tibetan equivalent is the term Sangye. And the etymology of that word is very interesting. The first syllable, Sang, implies the total eradication from our consciousness, from our being, our mind, all delusions, all neuroses, all ego, all negative states. This is what Buddha has found to be possible. And then the other syllable, Sangye, that implies the complete development of all the goodness of the love, the compassion, the empathy with others, the connectedness with others. And that's the 2 wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. So the Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva path, Bodhisattva is an awakening person. A person who's heading towards becoming a Buddha. Often a Buddha is known as an awakened person. So the Bodhisattva path, as they call it, or the Mahayana path, the great vehicle, is where you've got the 2 wings of the bird. You do the wisdom wing, and then you don't not just come back. You want to come back again and again out of compassion to help others. That's the attitude. So that Tibetan Buddhism in Japan to some extent, Buddhism in Taiwan, China to some extent, is from that tradition. And then there's an added component that's really only in Tibet now. It's called the Vajrayana, the most esoteric, the most advanced levels of practice. The Vajrayana Buddhism, they call it. Okay? That's in essence. So within Tibet, though, over the centuries, since the 8th century, like everywhere, I mean, look at the number of Christian churches now. Just even that meeting we had at lunchtime, 4 people with completely different views. I mean, I just thought, when I was a Catholic, the world was divided into Catholics and Protestants. You bunch should be the Protestant Christian Catholic. You know, Catholics are the real ones, the Protestants are these mistaken people, you know, isn't it? And I mean, even when I was a kid, there was one girl in our school called Mary Lou Feinberg, and they said, oh, you know, she's Jewish. I've never met a Jewish person, you know. I was just a Catholic, so very small world. And now there are millions of variations, aren't there, Christians. So and what that is, I suppose you could say, is just different ways of thinking, different ways of interpreting, isn't it? Well, in Buddhism in Tibet, you could say there are four main schools of thought that cultivate over the centuries, you know. And the one that I'm part of is the same as the Dalai Lama. So what else? Other questions? Any other kind of questions? Okay, so here we're talking about Buddha, this person called Buddha. So, you know, like I mentioned last night, and I mentioned now the characteristics of Buddha. Like I said to you, right? You know, it almost sounds like the same definition as God. Infinite wisdom, omniscient, infinite compassion, empathy, and love for others, and infinite power. I don't know, three essential qualities of enlightened being, of God, would you say that? I don't know, we'll define God differently. But sort of, if you think of God, I'll use Buddhist words. Does this sound like God? God is everywhere, God pervades the universe, and then God is all-knowing, all-compassionate. Yeah, is that right? Is God like that? You can personify him according to Jesus, can't you? You're a Christian, would that be right? But God is not manifest, not physical. Yeah, what are you saying? I'm asking you. Okay, good, thank you. So that's Buddha. But the difference is, the Buddha says, we can all become that way. We can all become our own Buddha. But there's not one of them who is simply there, who didn't have a cause, didn't have a source, who is the source of everything else, and who punishes and rewards and creates. Not like that. The Buddha would say those characteristics of infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite power, infinite love, they are the natural potential of all consciousnesses, all sentient beings, all minds. And the one that we know about was the Buddha of 2,500 years ago. He was a regular guy who became that, became a Buddha. Now I know from a Christian point of view, that sounds like it can't be possible because God by definition is beyond the ordinary laws of the universe. He didn't have a cause and could not possibly have been ordinary. You see my point? But I'm only saying the Buddhist approach. So that if it's true then that our beings who have become a Buddha, they're infinitely powerful, infinitely compassionate, and their only job is their lives. So we pray to Buddha. In fact, we have many manifestations of different Buddhas. They're just different kind of manifestations of different qualities of the Buddha. And they're personified, you know, like, and so prayer is a major part of our practice. You pray to the Buddha. You can, sort of like, as a, you know, you would ask the doctor to help you. They've got the expertise. They're dying to help you. They give you advice. They might even do something skillful that actually cure you. But really, it's you who takes the medicine. It's you who takes the advice. It's you who puts it into practice. So that's our relationship with the Buddha. But infinitely wise, infinitely compassionate, who we rely upon, whose advice we rely upon, which we try to practice. And so you reach out to the Buddha. Very strong devotion, very strong prayer. That's a major role, especially to Does that make sense?
Buddha then offers us tools to deal with the cards of the best.
Exactly, because he's giving us the tools that he used for himself, that he became a Buddha with. So he's giving us what he has found working, and that's what the Buddhist is doing, is using the tools, using his methodology that he says he used to become who he is. As he put it that way, as opposed to being a creator of them. And therefore his job is also not to punish or reward. Because Buddha would say this law of karma, like we talked briefly last night, which is what Buddha says runs the universe. It doesn't have a person, no one made it up, no one's running it. It runs in every single being's lives. So the negative tendencies will cause us to do negative things, which is to harm others, and they leave tendencies in our mind, or seeds in our mind, that will run into the future as our own suffering. It's natural law that will cause suffering. It's not punishment. It just occurs naturally. Like if you eat lousy food, you get a bellyache. It's not punishment, it's just a natural consequence. And the Buddha would say that virtue and goodness, the natural consequence of that in my consciousness as it goes along, is happiness and all the qualities. You see what I'm saying? That's the Buddha thing. See, there's a sense of accountability. You've got to do the job. You rely, definitely rely on people, you rely on it. And And the same way, I mean, Tibetan Buddhists, an enormous amount of prayer and devotion, huge amount. I mean, yeah, oh my head, I'm Tibetan. Does that make sense, Gary? Right. Okay. Well, if I look at Asia, which was mainly what was Buddhist, they were completely patriarchal. You know? I mean, you would, I mean, you know, they were really patriarchal. Men ran the show. But the Buddhist view, the Buddhist approach would be in general, everybody, male or female, has the same potential to become an enlightened being. So it's more a cultural thing. Like in Tibet, they were very patriarchal. Most of the bosses were men. Most of the ones who ran the show were men. But now that I've seen Buddhism in the West, because this is a different culture, then I would say, like for example, in the organisation of Buddhist centres that I'm part of for the last many years, there are as many women teaching as there are men. And so my teachers, basically, if they see you've got a quality, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. Whether you're a monk or a nun or a lay person, if you've got the quality, they'll give you the job. Because we've all got the same potential. That's pretty much the bottom line. So often it's a cultural thing. What suits a certain culture. You know, some cultures are more traditional, more patriarchal. You understand? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, this is why I like to say, I'm taking Buddhism as my working hypothesis. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, I'm not trying to be silly when I say that. Because often, you know, if you take the view that Buddha is not a creator, and that everything that Buddha achieved himself is coming from his own experience. It's not from revelation, it's not from on high, it's from his own direct experience, and that he's laid that down. Then strictly, technically speaking, you can say Buddhism isn't a belief system. Technically it isn't. That he says everything that he has observed to be true, including reincarnation, including the law of karma, including Buddhahood, all of this is from his own experience. So strictly speaking, it's not a belief system, it's not merely believing it. You actually have to apply it. And so that's why I prefer to say I'm using this as my working hypothesis, which means I take it deadly seriously. I am fully fledged Buddhist. I've been doing this for more than half my life now. And so for me, it's an ongoing, step-by-step process of listening to the teachings, understanding the philosophy, practicing, and each step of the way, if I'm being authentic, surely if I'm doing it properly, I will be experiencing and verifying each step of the way. So as the Dalai Lama often says, if you are following the steps, that you get to a point where you do discover that it's not correct, that Buddha is wrong, you must reject. So all I can say is for myself, so far so good. Does that make sense? It was almost like saying, almost for me, I don't mean it in any cynical way, because I think when I say it's my working hypothesis, meaning I'm prepared to fight for the wrong. I'm not being cynical about it, because I think one of our biggest problems with religion, we tend to get a bit superficially lazy, or just swallow the whole thing whole. And then we get bored and chuck it all out, you know. Or to believe whatever the biggest mob believes. If somebody everybody stops believing that, you've got to join the other club. So I think we often don't use much integrity in thinking. We just kind of, and I'm not putting just believing down. It ends up helping you become a better person, go for it, you know. But I think sometimes when faith goes, many people talk about it. When your faith goes, what do you get to life? Okay. And you never got to fall back on with understanding the teachings and being very clear about it. You see what I'm saying? Because when we block down it, we can be very emotional, you know. Okay, I will, roughly. Okay. Seriously, just recently, one of my jobs is to finish books with my teachers. So I just finished the last 5 years working on a book on Zopa, how to help your loved ones at the time of death. You know, and so the whole process, especially if you're dying slowly, you know, to help the person be ready to provide a most conducive environment, the person allowed to know what to do, how to help the person with their practice. There's lots of things to do to help have a really peaceful, good death, you know. And the crucial point for Buddhism, the reason to have a good death, being a peaceful, virtuous death, is because it's at the time of death, that, as they call it, I would say, the karmic seeds that will be triggered, that will cause your next rebirth. This happens before you at the time of death, so death is a really crucial time. So basically the process, they describe it, you know, as as a sort of a gradual kind of deep. What's her name? Amanda. Okay. So there's Amanda. She's on a deathbed. And she's pretends she's a Buddhist, okay? And she's dying slowly. That means throughout her life, she's been very aware that she's going to die. She's not really in denial of it. A lot of the Buddhist teachings are very extensive on understanding death, accepting we're going to die, understanding impermanence, so we don't really fantasy it, you know. Not because it's a fearful thing, but just because it's reality, it's part of life. So I think in the materialist world, we don't mind thinking about death, because the best you can do as a materialist, you've got to look forward to a black hole. Who wants to fall into a black hole? Nobody. So we live in denial, right? But if you're a Christian, you look forward to heaven, isn't it? I mean, if you're really devoted, if you're a Muslim, you look forward to that. So the Buddhists got a similar idea. So confronting the reality today of life is a crucial part. And which, of course, also means for a Buddhist that you want to live a good life. Not because at the end of life you get rewarded, because your own actions themselves will bring their own reward. So my mother used to say, she was a Catholic, virtue has its own rewards. Well, that's the Buddhist idea of karma. Whatever we think and do and say necessarily kind of leaves in our so seeds in our mind, or we like programs our mind. And that the negative one will ripens our suffering, and that includes suffering rebirth, or tendencies or experiences. And the virtuous one ripens happiness. That's a fundamental kind of principle. So that drives your wish to want to practice, first for your own sake, because you see the suffering. You don't want to suffer in reverse, you don't want to have misery, you don't want to have bad relationships, you don't want to keep having anger and jealousy. So for your own sake, you want to live a good life, but also because you want to love others, so the two wings of the bird. And that compels you in your daily life, and then of course death will be a fine experience. So then at the time of death, so what happens with Amanda, let's say if I'm being your helper and I'm your friend and I'm doing, so you get losing the pot a bit and I do your practices for you so you can hear the prayers, I have a CD on that because that's really helpful for the mind to calm you down. And also the Buddha would say everything we see and hear especially commonly decreases in our mind. So it's really good for you to hear the Buddhist prayers, hear your practices, that kind of helps you relax, And then slowly I'll recognise the time when the actual death process starts. And they describe it in great detail, but I'll just describe it briefly here. Because basically this person is meant to be instructed. So first of all, your ability to, hold a lot of information in your mind starts to cease. Your eye consciousness starts to go. You can't hear things. And then slowly through the first few stages, as described in about 8 stages, by the time you stop breathing, you're not dead yet, not for the Buddhists, but you've kind of lost the plot. You forget who you are, you've lost, your senses have ceased, your breathing has ceased, your ability to know what's going on has ceased. And actually, sometimes you're going to fear. And so even probably before you stop breathing, they say, that the karmic seed, this way they use it, is kind of triggered, that will be the one that will cause you already on autopilot to go to the next room. So if a man dies really peacefully and virtuously, then that will trigger a very virtuous seed. We're carrying around billions of karmic seeds, if you like, from everything we've said and done and thought, all programmed in our mind. So dying peacefully can encourage a very virtuous seed to be triggered, and already that's programming you to go to your next level of Buddha. And that could be several weeks' time, because they talk about rebirth. Unless you're a highly realised being, you don't need to be born at all. Or if you're a highly realised being, you can choose to be born really black. You're in charge of the process. For a regular person, just a good, nice person like you could say, unless you're a great, special meditator. So then by the time you stop breathing, you're not dead yet. That's when you're ready for the body name, around materialist culture. And I know when my grandma died, she was a Catholic, we lived with her several days, and the nuns would come in and say prayers. It's very similar to the Buddhist tradition. Usually, the Tibetan tradition, we live with us for 3 days and be very respectful. People would come in and rotate and do prayers and special things. You wouldn't talk, you would really treat with great respect, you keep very peaceful and very nice, So from the time you stop breathing, in Buddhism they say now your subtle consciousness, which is the same as when you dream. It's a subtle level of conscious being. That's still in the body, and that gradually gets more subtle and more subtle, and eventually that will leave the body, and there's certain indications of when that leaves the body. They say that everything happens to the heart chakra, and if you feel above here, it's still warmth there, even though the rest of your body is very cold, it means your very subtle mind is still in the body, and you will not touch the body until that goes. They say it's usually after 3 days. And then as soon as your consciousness leaves the body, you're on autopilot now, right? There's no awareness. You're already programmed for the next life. And you go through this kind of like experience, like a dream, it's like an intermediate state. I think it's a bit similar to the Christian teachings about, what are they called? Purgatory. That's right, purgatory. There's many similarities in many which is not functional. So it's sort of intermediate period. And it's almost like you're waiting for your mummy and daddy to hop into bed. Basically, if you've got to make human birth, you know. And so then when you give mummy and daddy hop into bed, then you kind of, the karma ripens, isn't it? And you run like an egg. The first step of conception is when the egg and sperm come together. And that's when you zap it there and then off you go to the person. Well, then, I mean, here's the Buddhist view, like we just mentioned with Amanda. They talk about, you've got gross consciousness, which is how we function day to day, our conceptuality and our sensory experiences, which is all we think of in the materials view, isn't it? It's like when you stop breathing, that's finished. Well, that's just a gross level of consciousness, your thoughts and feelings and emotions. We all know we have a dream level, which there's no real, I don't think there's any kind of reading in psychology about dreams, it's a really strange experience. Everyone has different views. But that's also the same level of consciousness that the Buddhists would say is what's happening when you leave your body and have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. Okay, the Christians might call that the soul leaves the body, but the Buddhists would say it's a state of consciousness, which is a continuity of your gross one. So most of us, we have dreams, we're not really in charge of it. When you're really an advanced practitioner, you can use your meditation to have complete control, and you can go to the subtle level, which is infinitely more powerful and more capable of doing the work of developing properties, and they can have complete control over that. They will not be ever unconscious. I mean, many of these great practitioners, like my teacher on the Zohar, he never actually becomes unconscious. He never actually goes to sleep, because he's got all these skills in meditation. When he goes to these more subtle levels, and you're able to do much more work on yourself and rid the mind at subtle levels of all nonsense, do you understand? So ordinarily you wouldn't go to sleep when you drink, right? But you can learn from your dream because it's your consciousness, and the Buddhist view would be, and like I've said before, this whole idea of karma is that every single thing any being sees or hears or experiences or thinks about, none of it goes astray. I mean, even in one day, we don't remember 99% of that day, we forget all the thoughts we thought, we don't remember. But every single thing that goes on in our mind, with every single of our senses, the Buddhist view would be none of it gets lost. It gets all imprinted. And that's what often comes out in dreams. They can even be past experiences from past lives, memories of things, all this kind of chaos of our unconscious. It's all our own stuff imprinted. And the whole job is to sort all that mess out, get it all become conscious and get rid of the rubbish and go to goodness. And the greatest meditators can do that. So basically, I mean, the simple way of putting it, learning about itself is what the job is. Learning to distinguish between the negative states of mind, the neuroses, the anger, the fears, all this stuff, which the Buddha says you get rid of, and learning through your own daily work, knowing your own mind more and more, to distinguish between those. So like, if I've got a boyfriend, I'm going to say James, I'm in love with James, my boyfriend. For example, the Buddhist teaching on attachment. If you read any Buddhist books, you hear about attachment. It's a massive point in Buddhism. And what attachment is under the negative head, and it's a neurotic, I-based state of mind. It's completely like a junkie to get what I want. So that's, and that makes James look much more divine than he really is. It makes me really obsessive, it makes me possessive, it makes me needy and manipulative to get what I want. But luckily I've got some love in there, which is under the positive heading, and that's the part that's empathetic, that wants James to be happy, that causes me to be patient and kind. I mean, theoretically. So when you see the relationships that don't work, that's because attachment runs the show, and in the moment attachment doesn't get what it wants, anger arises, and look at the relationships, look at the nightmares in the earth, But we've got our saving grace is our good stuff, so your crucial job in my own mind, before I leave it to a relationship with James, is to start to recognise and distinguish between attachment and love. So when James is doing everything I want, of course I feel blissfully happy, and I definitely want him to be happy, which is called love. But if I'm not, but if he stops doing what my attachment wants, guess what happens? My love goes down the toilet. Forget this, I'm angry with him, I chuck it out and get another version, So to learn to distinguish between attachment and love, for example, is a huge job. That really needs a lot of internal work. Because they come together. They're like, they look the same, they feel the same, but you can't distinguish. So that's the big part. Or to even distinguish between love, anger, and compassion, it's a very strong one. We see poor people suffering, we see poor animals first, we have compassion for them, but almost immediately we get angry at the person who caused it, and we often think it's righteous anger. I mean, anger is fine, but often, you know, we've got to really distinguish between the erotic anger, which is eye-based, and is completely neurotic and exaggerates the badness and makes a mess of it, perhaps. So I remember one time Dalai Lama was asked, anger looks like it's a good policy when you're really trying to help others. He says it can make you act. And he said, the Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean, but if it mainly comes from anger, it doesn't last. You give up your good work. But if it comes from compassion, you'll never give up. But also, I remember Martin Luther King saying, I think it's very profound, he said it's okay to be angry, meaning to see there's fault out there. There's racism, there's sexism, there's suffering. You've got to see it. But instead of just raging on about it and getting angry, you then say, what can I do to help? That's compassion. So to distinguish between anger and compassion is a huge one. Attachment and love. You know, or even if you, in other words, all the delusions, all these neuroses, they're eye-based, they're distorted, they're fear-based, and they make a mess of our good stuff. And they make a mess of our relationships. So to know the difference between them, it takes a lot of inner work, a lot of real clarity in your own mind, you know. So shall I sing my prayer again? Shall I do that? Okay. So I'll sing two little prayers in Tibetan. And the first one is basically saying, I'm going to be very loose here, it's basically saying, here we've been for about an hour together, an hour and a quarter. And the Buddhist view would be as many thoughts as everyone's had, is as many seeds with each planted in our mind. It won't go astray. So we make this prayer sort of saying, okay, we make this aspiration to really, to never give up on ourselves, to recognize our potential and want to nourish these seeds so we can develop this potential of ours, no matter how long it takes, so that we can be better for others, because we all do this all together, 2 weeks of work. And the second little prayer is makes the aspiration, the compassion, growing in the hearts of all.